Hello, everyone. My name is Allie Jones, and I first of all wish I could be meeting with you in person in your living rooms at your kitchen table. I thank you so much for your bravery and just even coming to this session. And I wish that we didn't have a screen separating us. And I know that I can't make the eye contact that I want, but it's an honor to meet you as best as I can here today. And I just am very grateful to be here. And I recognize that this is a very difficult session to be a part of. And so I want to go as slowly as I can with the next hour, just really honoring your time. And we'll share my contact information later because I am welcoming any of your questions and your thoughts. So that being said, my name is Allie. Like I said, I am a volunteer with Inheritance of Hope. I've been plugged in for the last couple months, and it has been such an honor and a privilege to be able to meet different kids, different families. I help lead one of the groups, the Hope at Home groups, on Monday evenings, and it has just been such a wonderful privilege. I also have a background I have a master's in counseling, and I am a certified child life specialist. So I worked in the hospital setting for many years, working primarily with pediatric oncology, but I also would be consulted to work with children of adult patients, and typically coming to meet them during end of life or terminal illness conversations. And so that has been a huge passion of mine, to help empower families in the words to use. And so that is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about coming alongside of you today. So that being said, let me share my screen with you all so that you can see this presentation as well. I titled it Engaging in Unimaginable Conversations. These are conversations that no parent ever wanted to have. So how do you explain terminal illness and death to children and teens, and why should you? So that being said, I'd like to first start by having you all grab a piece of paper or something to write with, and then set a timer for 2 minutes. I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to try to play even some music, but you can feel free to mute me, turn off your screens, do whatever is comfortable for you. And while you take these next 2 minutes, I want you to jot down every single thing that comes to your mind of things that are weighing you down today. It could be things as significant and heavy as your illness that you're walking through, or the pains that you're carrying with your children. Or it could be things like the to-do list that you have this weekend, the things that need to get done. So start asking yourself, what feels heavy for you? What grieves you? What burdens are you carrying? And just write down everything that comes to mind, because we want to start here by recognizing what you're carrying. So I'm going to hide myself, or I'm going to stop my video and then go ahead and take the next 2 minutes to just start writing what comes to mind. About 1 more minute. Okay, go ahead and start finding a stopping point. Okay. So the reason I had us start here is just because as a parent or a caregiver, you yourselves are carrying an incredible burden. And so I really want to create space to just address the pain, the heaviness, the weight that you have today. I wish we could dialogue more about what that is, but I encourage you to continue to revisit that so that you have other people in your life that are carrying those burdens with you. So, a few of our goals for this session. First, I want you to feel better prepared and equipped so that you can help equip and prepare your child throughout this unimaginable medical journey. I also hope that you will gain practical words, tools, and resources on how to engage in these impossible conversations. I know that you know your child best, that you're going to have intuition as I'm talking about certain things, that you're going to feel that gut instinct as the parent. And so let that lead you, let that guide you during this time. And I know that we're not going to leave feeling great and happy and smiling during this, but I also know that there is going to be some elements sprinkled in throughout this presentation about where you're working with your children that love Paw Patrol or anime or whatever they're into, that there can be layers of joy and of relating to your children in times of laughter and silliness intermixed throughout these hard conversations. So I first want to start about talking about the lens of a parent and the lens of a child. Both are very different and yet similar. So let's just take a look. So you all are going through very similar grief. You're both grieving this illness, this impending change in your life, but you're doing so in a different way. So starting with the adult lens, these are some of the voices that you as the adult might feel. So you might experience feelings like, this is such a great burden. The future ahead is going to be filled with pain. I know my child will understand the heaviness of the illness, but I'm not even sure I understand when they're able to tell back the details. So thinking about how is a child even going to be able to understand this? And that's the way I'm going to be able to know that they understand, is when they're able to perfectly share what the illness is, the name, all of that. Like, that's how I know that the learning has happened. Whereas the child, on the other hand, oftentimes are very egocentric and they're focused on their basic needs. That's their priority. Can I have goldfish today? Can I go play with my friends? They live in the present and they are concerned with today. Play is their language. Even those adults or those young adolescents even play their video games, their socialization with friends. And explanation or not, they can tell something is different. So at the end of the day, that's their lens, that they may not know the words, but they know that something has changed in the family. So I first want to also go through this. I'll try to go rather quickly because I also know you as a parent, no matter if you know theory or not, you're already able to pick up some of these nuances of how your child might be perceiving grief. But I think it's important to address this, to first acknowledge how children know more than we think. And this is kind of the lens on how they view grief. So they first understand that, starting with infants. Infants, they understand more than we even think. They're a baby. They can't talk. They can barely, some can barely even see in front of them, but they can tell that something is different, even at their tiny little age. They are also reactive to the emotions of adults, even if they have no comprehension of what that means. So you might see, if you have infant children at home, that as you're grieving, as you're processing, you might see increased irritability. You might see them react stronger to separation, or they could even regress in some of their behaviors, like especially sleeping patterns or eating. And those are some of the ways that infants grieve. When you move into the toddler stage, toddlers don't know a lot about death necessarily, but they can understand a little bit of it, but they can't wrap their mind on how it's irreversible, or they might think that it's more temporary. They can also, like infants, feed and sense emotions, or feed off of and sense emotions. So they show it by, they process through their grief by being more agitated in the changes in the schedule or the routines, even small significant ones like going to grandma's house instead of going to school. They can often have feelings of abandonment and display their grief through tantrums or regression or confusion. And they can also, toddlers love to start asking those questions about why, and you might start to get a lot of those repetitive questions as well, even in the grief process. Moving along to how preschoolers grieve. So they are starting to understand that death and illness is a little more permanent. They more are in that concrete operational stage, and so abstract concepts like heaven are often difficult for them to understand. And they are especially attentive to parents' emotions. So if you're driving the car having a conversation as partners or spouses, you're going to notice your children in the back might be paying extra attention to the tone, to the language, the words. And they display their grief by oftentimes feeling very responsible. They start to express feelings of guilt. And we're going to talk more about that as well, and how to help assure them. They oftentimes can deal with worry about who's going to take care of them. They rely a lot on play to process, and you might see them being very imaginative, very playful. They're capable of showing sadness for only short periods of time, which I think is a really important thing to just keep in our mind, that children oftentimes don't grieve the same way. They're grieving the same loss, but doing so in a different way. And sometimes that's a difference that we see. And they also have a strong desire for affection, or on the opposite end, they can be more aggressive. So you can see those mood swings start to happen. School-age children start to understand that death is final, that terminal illness could be more permanent. They also can see death as the taker or the spirit that comes and gets you, and they connect death with violence. You might see them start to fixate on this more and more. Things like video games that they're playing, or movies that they've watched, that can be something that they really latch on to if there's that theme. They oftentimes can have fear that death is contagious. And they also demonstrate a curiosity about how things work, about the body, about how the body functions. So you're going to see them start to display their grief by asking for more details. And that can be a really big cue for adults to really follow their lead with school agers, that they're going to communicate when they're wondering more, usually. You also will start to see more of a fear that others that they love are going to die. And they might have trouble verbally expressing their feelings and are more prone to showing distress through behavior problems. So you might get those phone calls from school that they acted out, or you might just start to see that at home. And then you also will continue to see that narrative that can be displayed of them blaming themselves for the illness. And finally, teens. So they are starting to develop more and more mature concepts of illness and of loss, and even the future thinking, but they're not quite yet mature enough. That prefrontal cortex hasn't developed enough in their coping skills either. And they oftentimes could even buy into the belief that death and terminal illness is an interruption, and that death is the enemy. And you might see them process some of their grief by withdrawing and act like they don't want to talk, hide their feelings to protect. If you have teens at home, no matter if they're grieving or not, you probably have already seen these tendencies when you're asking about how their day at school was or things along those lines. They may not be as forward. They may also feel a deep sense of responsibility that they need to take over the loved one's role. You might start to see them engage in risky behavior or be more angry or irritable. They have a strong sense and longing to be with their peers and process with their peers. And then you also might see them struggle with repression of feelings, kind of that similar withdrawal, or difficulty with making long-term plans, especially for our teens that are a little later, more older, that are starting to think about college or next steps after graduation, that you might start to see them get hung up on those details because of how they're grieving and what your family is going through. So then the question is, okay, so that being said, we know that children grieve, that they process their emotions, maybe in different ways than adults, but their emotions are still very much real in there. Why should your child know? I'd like to start by thinking about why shouldn't you tell them? And working with families, these are just a few of the reasons that I've seen and experienced when I've met with a family for the first time to think about these initial conversations. So I apologize if you can't see very well on the screen as well, but oftentimes parents might think, well, I don't want them to feel scared or sad. I want to protect them from heartbreak. So that is one of the reasons that you want to protect them. That's your role as the parent or the caregiver. That's really how you feel strongly led. It makes complete sense. You also may think they're too young to understand. My child is only 2. How can they possibly understand this? Again, I'm trying to comprehend this. Or I hear the thought, I just want them to be a kid. I don't want to burden them, kind of with that same point of just like, I just want to let them live their life and have a fun time. And this is where I'd love to have you pause. And if you feel comfortable even potentially pausing this video or taking a few minutes yourself too, I'd love for you to think about, and I'm just going to give us a minute here. I'll turn off my screen again, but think about, what does it mean to be a kid? Maybe you can jot down a list of things that you think about, but if that's something that's a goal for you, I want you to think about what are some of your goals for having your child be a kid, and then how will illness impact that, or maybe not. So I'm going to give just a minute here to think about that. Okay, so that being said, maybe a few things came to your mind on what does it look like to be a child in this scenario? What are some things that are going to be impacted? What are some of the things that are not? So I want to leave, I want to not leave you, but begin with this quote. So the greatest gift you can give your children is not protection from change, loss, pain, or stress, but the confidence and tools to cope and grow with all that life has to offer them. This is from a doctor of internal medicine. She is a wife, a mother, and a cancer survivor. So just think about this quote for a minute of how you can give your child the confidence and tools to cope and grow with all that life has to offer them. It's kind of a new way of reframing why these conversations matter. I also would love to share, and again, I apologize if some of the writing gets cut off, if my face is in the top right-hand corner or left-hand, depending on how you're looking. But I want to give some other top 10 considerations to be honest about illness. And as I read off this list, I want you to think about, does the one really jump out at you and you think, oh my goodness, this really resonates with me on perhaps a new way of thinking that I haven't thought before, and why I should talk to my children openly and honestly about my illness. So first, we show that grief is normal and natural response to terminal illness. Number 2, by being honest about our illness or about terminal illness, we teach children how to label and understand their emotions. Number 3, we show them that it's okay to feel pain, anger, fear, and sadness. We model how to share feelings in an open and honest way. Number 5, we establish trust by not lying to them. Trust builds a sense of security in their lives. Number 6, we help them understand both positive and negative ways of handling emotions. Number 7, we teach them that their thoughts and feelings are important to us. Number 8, we teach them that they will grieve in their own and unique way, just like us. Number 9, we demonstrate a sincere love for who they are today and the people they're growing to be. And number 10, it's the cornerstone of deepening resiliency, courage, and family connection. So again, looking at this list, what one resonates with you especially? I'd love to take a moment to actually read an excerpt from Kristen Milligan. She's the co-founder of Inheritance of Hope, which was founded in 2007. Some of you may be familiar with her story, but she was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer and had 3 small children, Ashley, Luke, and Rebecca. And so I wanted to just read a powerful excerpt from her of her own testimonial as a mother, reconciling what does it mean to be a mom and to explain her terminal illness to her children. So she says that there were nights when I woke terrified, considering the very real possibility that my 3 small children could be raised without a mother, and that my husband might unwillingly face the lonely task of single parenthood. For weeks, my heart was literally seized with fear. God, through these 2 verses, Psalms 35, which says, weeping may continue for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And Proverbs 3:5, trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. God brought me great comfort in the beginning of the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, from Philippians 4:7. A peace not only for my more recent fears initiated by the cancer, but all fears I held regarding my children or my family. I have ceased my prior habit of lying awake at night, worrying over how to protect my children from circumstances over which I have no control. God had showed me while on my knees almost 2 years ago that I needed to trust him with my life. He was now asking me to trust him with theirs. He told me that it was not my job to care for and protect these people. It was his, and he never fails. He's infinitely loving and infinitely wise, and he is not limited by death. He would never leave them, and he will never leave your children. This is from the excerpt, Consider It Pure Joy, A Mother's Fears and God's Miracle of Peace by Kristen. If you haven't read it, it's a phenomenal book. So I'd love to transition now. So we've talked a little bit about the children's knowledge, their understanding of grief, the power, the impact that being honest can have on them. So now transitioning this conversation to how do you practically talk with children about your diagnosis after you've been diagnosed and receive this news. So first and foremost, you are a priority. Your feelings matter. Just like we opened up this conversation, taking time for you is critical. So how are you processing this news? Who do you need in your corner? What do you need to cope in this moment? So give space to take that breath. It's not always possible to deal with your own loss while providing nurturing care to your child. So you need help, and that's not a bad thing. So first, use your village. Kids will need other adults in their corner. So people like additional family members, school counselors, social workers, church leaders, therapists, Inheritance of Hope at home groups. That also is another way to just tap into different people to use their support. Children need other relationships in their life to come alongside of them, as do you. Give permission to share with others. So oftentimes parents might feel like or kids may even feel more like they can't say openly how they're doing with mom or dad with the illness. And so by you giving them permission, by connecting them with peers, with mentors, with trusted friends, it gives them that space if they're feeling like they want to protect you from their feelings to open. And it also gives further reassurance from safe places that there's other people that can take on a very nurturing, loving role, never replacing you, but really coming alongside of you. So as you're processing your own grief, I encourage you to be a student to learn about grief. So notice your grief and to help you accept it. When we think about how that list of 10 reasons really emphasizes you modeling for children how to handle grief in appropriate ways. So it's important that you start that with yourself of how do you notice your own grief. The Dougie Center is also a great resource. Even as I'm saying that, it could be Doogie, but I think it's Dougie. But it's a fantastic place if you just even want to look that up in your browser, on your phone. It has a wealth of knowledge and resources to help you come alongside of you and give you more tips. Seek out others who are grieving. So others who have walked in a similar road can offer hope and guidance and relate with you in a way that no one else can. Again, Inheritance of Hope offers hope at home groups for parents, for caregivers. And I really encourage you, if you're not already plugged into one of those, that this would be a great start of just having a place 1 hour a week where you can meet with people that just get it. You're all walking your own journey, but you can relate in so many unique and important ways. And then also know that it's okay to take a break from your grief. Laughter helps. Do things you enjoy with people you enjoy. Make memories and rituals as a family, which is another thing that we'll talk about later. So before you talk with your children, I want to leave just a few other keep in mind details. So first, grieving takes time. And it evolves with age as your children grow, and it demands so much patience. Oftentimes people just want to rush through it, rush through their grief, just get to the next stage. But just know that grief is actually more like a river. It's not this 5-step process that people go through. It takes time, it ebbs, it flows, there's rapids, there's seasons of calm. And that takes patience, that takes endurance as you're on that grief river. Also recognize that siblings will grieve differently than one another based on age, based on personality, so many different factors. And as you are beginning these conversations, be available, be present, model grief, and listen. Those are such core things as you're talking. So listening more than you talk is a huge guide. So first, beginning the conversation. I also am talking about this like a series of talks. And this is where we're really going to dive in to some practical tips, some practical words. So just continue to know that this is going to be an evolving, ongoing conversation. So first, consider that the perfect time is one that is created by you. I have so many parents that say like, oh, when should I do it? When's the perfect time? There is no perfect time. The most perfect time, quote unquote, is one that leaves ample space for questions, reactions, and clarification. So free yourself from that burden of wanting to protect your children from pain, and focus your attention on the perfect time is one that, again, has that ample time, that offers safety. So talk in a safe place where the child feels comfortable, free from distractions, but able to choose distractions if they want, if they're close by, like play items or ways to just leave the house for a little bit, take a walk, things like that. Build trust by being open, honest, and clear. So avoid phrases like went to sleep or maybe no longer with us or things along those lines. Naming the disease is going to feel incredibly harsh and incredibly hard, but taking into account that children, they don't have this schema built up necessarily of what cancer is, of what ALS is, of what these different diagnoses is. You are the educator here. You help frame this for them of what that means. So younger children, we're going to go in detail, but younger children need concrete details, while adolescents and even school age, you can kind of follow their lead. You can give information as they ask for it. And then validate the normal reactions, that trying to think like, I'm going to have a successful conversation. If my kid doesn't cry, that means that it was a good talk. It's normal if they cry. It's also normal if they don't. So continue to practice these core things. Listen without interrupting. Avoid minimizing their fears, which is going to be so hard to do as a parent because, of course, you want to give that reassurance. But trying to focus on identifying misconceptions, and it's okay to not know and to welcome questions. Those are all really important things to keep in mind. All right, so that being said, caring for your child's heart as well. So providing structure and routine is very important as this is going. So as we're having the conversation, you're also continuing to listen, validate, provide structure, provide routine. It gives children a sense of safety, control, helps promote normalcy during a very abnormal time. Continue to give them tasks and responsibilities. Continue to have the same expectations within reason for household chores or discipline. It helps them be seeing their role as a teammate, not the primary caretaker, but still a role in the family. And it helps them feel useful, needed, included, and then reduces their feelings of helplessness. So knowing that those tasks, those responsibilities, even involving them in your care in appropriate ways can be very helpful. And then encourage play. So time with friends to be social. It's a huge way that children express themselves. So of course you want to make that an open avenue for them, and gives you and your child momentary rest as you play together, as you play independently from one another, of just freedom from those burdens, even just for a short amount of time. So children are going to always be asking, always be wondering, did I cause it to happen? Can it happen to me? And who will take care of me now? So to continue to keep these questions in mind as you offer that reassurance. So especially, did I cause it to happen? This is probably the most important question to emphasize that it is not their fault. As I was thinking about how to talk about illness, there is no recipe, there is no perfect series of steps, but I did want to create this wheel, this again, ongoing kind of framework that you can use when you think about talking about illness again and again and again. So first, strategize. Second, assess. Third, alert. Fourth, disclose. And fifth, embrace. And I'm going to break those down. So first, strategize. When you are preparing to talk to your child about an illness, it's important that you again start with yourself. How are you doing? What support do you need? And then who can you loop in? Can you find a safe person? Maybe it's an aunt, maybe it's a best friend, or a mentor of the child's that can be that steady, supportive presence if you feel like that would be helpful during the initial first conversation. And then with that person, whether that be your spouse, friend, aunt, uncle, formulate a plan, kind of practice what you want to say, and then determine when and where you want this conversation to take place. Then assess. So assess so once you find your setting, your safe place, that's quiet, surrounded by comfort, begin by asking your child what they know. What do they already know? What concrete things have they seen or heard? And then really listen here on what are they expressing. Sometimes you will be surprised that children already know what's going on without you having to say. Again, that points to their development, that they're in tune with parents' reactions. So then alert, I call this a warning shot. So after you've met with them, you've asked, what do they kind of know? What have they been experiencing? A warning shot is starting to alert children that there's hard news to be shared. And the reason we use these warning shots or these alerts is that it sets the appropriate tone and gives a brief moment, a brief inhale for preparation. And so warning shot often sounds like, I have some sad news to share, or we are very worried about mom, or we're very worried about dad. So it gives space for children's emotion, for theirs and yours, just to take a breath, to alert them that things are hard. And then disclose. So disclose concrete information. So this is where, again, naming the disease is very critical. Explaining the disease in clear, concrete terms that children can understand, which I will go over a little bit of that as well. Focusing on how the disease impacts the body. Again, for those school agers that really are curious about how things work, this is a way to help inform them and eliminate some misconceptions. So using visuals here can be really helpful. Drawings, models of the body, Play-Doh, things along those lines can be really helpful. And during this disclosing of concrete information, it is more than okay to show how you feel. So verbalize and model your own emotions. Provide correct or validate new information. So that's something that's ongoing during this time. And then embrace. So as you embrace, you are giving permission and space for children to ask questions, to play, to process, and to disengage, and to be silent if they want. And as you're embracing them, you're continuing to offer reassurance and empathy. Again, honest reassurance, focusing on that it's not their fault, that no one did anything to cause this. And then you're modeling and reflecting your own feelings. So if you're crying at this point, if it's weighing you down, it's okay to say, "Mommy is so sad right now because of this news." It helps them see an appropriate way of handling their grief. It gives them permission to do the same. And as you embrace them in this stage, you're paying attention, you're listening, pay attention to how they're playing. Give them also choices on how they want to be involved moving forward. Do they want to know more information or do they not? So I want to take a moment just to give an example explanation. And I realize even that as I give this example, it may create tears and strong emotions. Just even hearing someone retell what this could be like. And I just want to validate that, acknowledge that I know that this is hard. That if you're not at this space yet to hear these practical words, it's okay to pause this. It's okay to try skip forward. Because I know just hearing someone try to rehearse it can be very painful. So if you're at a place of wanting to hear more, we're going to start again with this wheel of a guide of how to talk. So the first thing is, again, meeting with your spouse, your partner, your close confidants to process how you're doing. Inviting, in this scenario, we'll say that we invite a sister to come because we know that Auntie is a really safe person for your child. You meet together, you process, you pray if that's something that gives you comfort. And then you establish that time, that setting, when you want to meet. So in this scenario, it's you want to meet after school in the living room. And you're going to have a basket of toys or activities for them. Open-ended can oftentimes be really good just to give them that outlet when they need. Then you're going to assess. You're going to sit down with your child in a loving way, with aunt, with whoever is requested, and say, things have felt a little different around here. Haven't you noticed? Maybe you've noticed. What are your thoughts? What have you noticed? What have you seen? What have you heard? What have you noticed about Mommy and how she's been feeling? And as you say that, you're listening. Maybe your child says, Mommy seems to be moving pretty slow, or maybe Mommy seems to be hurting a lot, or I notice that Mommy's crying a lot. You can listen and validate, like, yes, that's true. Those are real things that we're noticing too. That leads into then the warning shot, that first warning shot. As you're listening, as their child is probably disclosing more information than what you even thought that they knew, you can respond by saying, yes, Mommy has been very sick. And we've been going to lots of doctor's appointments to try to learn what is making her feel so sick. And we have some very hard news to share. So again, that first warning shot. And then disclose concrete information. So here, this is where you then say, doctors found what is making Mommy sick. It's a sickness unlike anything you or I have ever had. It isn't like catching the cold. It's not contagious. And no one did anything wrong to make Mommy sick. The sickness is called cancer. Mommy has cancer in this scenario. And depending on what you think your child needs, as the role of a child life specialist, oftentimes I'd brainstorm with families or even come alongside them to potentially use some visuals here as well. So having an outline of the body. Sometimes I've used cancer. I've talked about the job of cells first and foremost, like how in your body you have a lot of different cells. You have your red blood cells, and you can do little drawings all around the body, and then talking about how one of those cells decided to change. And so now you take one of those cells, and a cell became a sick cell. The cell became cancer. And doesn't do anything good for the body, just causes it to hurt, causes it to feel sick. And then this cancer cell decided to make a lot of other cells become cancer cells. So now there's so much cancer in Mommy's body, and we need it to go away. And depending on where you're at in the treatment plan or what the plan is moving forward, this is another way where you can begin to send warning shots. Not necessarily talking about how this could be an end of life situation, but discussing about how doctors are going to try very hard to give Mommy's body medicine, but we're not sure what will work to get the cancer to go away. Again, there's lots of different visuals that you can use if you ever need help brainstorming. I am more than happy to connect with you afterwards, but sometimes that can be an appropriate thing to draw upon, those models, those drawings, Play-Doh, visuals, things, tactile things that kids can use to help them learn. And then embracing. So as you embrace silence. I think sometimes parents, myself included as the child life specialist, want to just keep talking, keep filling the void. It's okay to pause and to be still here, even do a quick check-in, assess, go back to that assessment, assessing what they know, what they're hearing. If this is a point where you start to feel, if not already, that you're crying a lot, again, very, very normal to be experiencing strong emotion right now. And even for kids to see the difference in parents. I've oftentimes seen one parent be very quiet and distant and still, and then the other be much more emotional and expressive. But verbalizing that daddy's very quiet right now because daddy's very sad and I'm trying to be still and think about that. Or we're crying right now because we're very sad and we know that it's okay to be sad and we don't want mommy to be sick. We don't want this to happen, and it's okay to cry. Or it's okay to not cry, and validate that for them. Ask them what questions do they have, and then re-emphasize that you're here for them, that you love them. Re-emphasize the things that are not going to change for them. That's very important during this time. As you prepare for reactions, reactions may be as varied as children themselves, which I think is a really good thing to keep in mind, that no reaction is good or bad. I had one mom reach out to me and say, like, it doesn't seem like my kids get it. Like, they didn't cry. They've been so numb. But knowing that that can be a way of them processing, even if they're not reacting. I've had other kids where I see them listen, and then all of a sudden they've started bringing their mom a ton of food, like a ton of snacks, a ton of things on the tray table in the hospital, and it was their way of trying to fix it and make her feel better. And if she's sick, well, maybe they feed her. So just know that there can be such a range of reactions. You may see with younger children that they may interrupt. They may ask unrelated questions. You may see a lot of flopping around, not paying attention, squirming. Those sort of things are very normal. They also, like that example I gave of the kid bringing their mom food, you might see them try to smooth things over, or they might seem genuinely uninterested. That you may have this whole plan of how to explain, and then the second you sit down to even begin your assessment, they're off in the next room doing something completely different. Older children, you may see them retreat to be by themselves, or you may see them show stronger emotion. So anger can be something I've seen a lot of teens express, punching the table or yelling, or on the opposite end, not saying anything at all and being a stone wall, to try to process that these are some common reactions, and to try to put away any expectations for how they might respond and to just be there. The only exception to this is when you start to see reactions of self-harm or wanting to hurt others. That is especially the difference to keep in mind. So now, how do we continue those ongoing conversations? So always communicate that you care, that you're seeking to build trust, and then trying to prepare them for what's immediately ahead. So any new information regarding the illness, treatment, or procedures is very important to continue to communicate. Again, going back to that cycle, that guide, when those changes happen. Changes in appearance or functioning of the person, changes in the care plan, such as disease progression, hospice, hair loss, if it's related to chemotherapy. And then any changes in routine that impact the family. So continue to give children appropriate choices of how the child wants to be involved in changes in treatment and care plans. Really going back to continue to follow their lead is very, very important. I also want to give a testimonial of an adult who lost her parent at age 8. And she shared that instead of, why did my mom or my dad leave me so soon? She asks, what did I get out of the time that I had? And this feels like kind of a jarring transition, that we're talking about how to have conversations and then we're talking about making memories, that this can all feel so hard to even comprehend. But I do want to touch on the importance of bonding together during this time in a way that's helpful for your family. So memories can leave legacy. That's something that's a huge mission, the mission of Inheritance of Hope, but it also can be very therapeutic. So even though you're doing one goal of leaving a legacy with your children, whether that be handprints of you or special crafts that involve a special touch from mom or dad, you're also processing, you're also inviting those conversations to happen on how your child is coping. So things like creating memory boxes, letter writing, bracelet making, making beads that represent different things that you love to do, artwork, picture collages, handprints, things like that. Blankets. In one Hope at Home group I was a part of, we had one child show off a t-shirt blanket that the sibling pair made of their dad's t-shirts, and one of the girls chimed in and she said, "Can you hold that up to the camera again? Oh, that's interesting. I think I might want to do that with my mom." And her mom had not passed away yet. And so those sort of things, she even wanted to do something therapeutic, something connecting with her mom. So really start to think, what are some things that you can do? And I know we are nearing the end of our time, and so I want to leave a few practical tools in addition to memory making that you can also do with your children at home. So the first is thinking about life rhythms. Talk times, I think, can be a very helpful thing for families. So create check-ins to give space for your kids to process and ask questions. So whether that be maybe one night a week that you crawl into bed with them as they're falling asleep and just say, "How you doing? How's your day at school?" It doesn't have to be of like, "How do you feel about my illness?" But it can just be ways of that intentional conversation. You can be available and respect their boundaries. I've even heard of some families that they have gotten a stuffed elephant, for example, and they put it in the corner of the room. And so during dinner time, if someone is starting to allude to the elephant in the room, they can point to it and laugh about it. And even if like that's something that the kid doesn't want to talk about the elephant today, they don't want to talk about the parent's illness, that can be an outlet to say like, you know what, that's okay to maybe have the reverse of talk times. And then continue to ask those questions of tell me more if they want to tell more, giving that permission to that space, play more, paying attention to their cues. Life rhythms of normalcy and consistency. So routine schedules, again, kind of going back to what we've already talked about, keeping some of the chores the same, the expectations for discipline, that life does not stop. You want it to continue. You want those kids to be kids. So continue that momentum. Play together, promote relationships with friends and mentors. And again, laughter is medicine. So finding ways that it's okay to laugh, and it again models for them too. Oh, an appropriate way of dealing with grief also looks like laughing sometimes, and not always being sad. And again, that's completely what your family is feeling led in that moment. I want to share a few children's books and additional resources with you too. There is a vast amount out there online. And so these are just a few books that you can look up today. I recognize that sometimes because there's so much information online, it can be overwhelming. So When Dinosaurs Die, A Guide to Understanding Death can be a good book to look into. Sad Isn't Bad. Facing Uncertainties, so a guide to help children cope during a loved one's medical challenges. This is actually a PDF that I have access to, that if you're interested in seeing more, you can contact me and let me know. And then something called a conversation toolkit. This is something that I created for you all in light of this presentation. And there will be a way for you to have access to it to learn more about it. So I wanted to give kind of a little bit of a snapshot about this. So this will be a PDF that you'll have access to download to print. And my intention with this packet is that there's a children's workbook and then there's a teen workbook of just several pages for them that you can use right after you've had that initial conversation. And this is like a journal or an activity worksheet for kids that kind of scaffolds them through the grieving process, the processing experience of what it looks like to try to work through this new unimaginable news that they've gotten. So this is just kind of what you'll see on the screen, just a little snapshot of what it can look like with each page. On the side with the little icons of the light bulbs, the hearts, the clouds, the thinking thoughts, and those are for teens. So things like, what immediate feelings did you feel when you were told about your parents' illness, that they can write that. And then for children, there's different activities, different ways for them to draw, to do art, to think about what it was like for them to process this news in child-centered language. This is something that you can do with your child one-on-one next to them at the dinner table. This is something that you could give to them and have them do on their own. You know your children best again. And if this is a helpful resource for you, I would love for you to be able to use it and see how it can just come alongside of you in these conversations. So all that being said, I think it's important just to take a breath, a pause. I know that I felt like I was rushing through a lot of that. Getting to have this conversation in 1 hour doesn't feel like enough. And it especially, I wish I could give more space to hear your voice, to hear what you're processing. So even after the end of this call, if you're able to stay with some of the people that have joined, just to process, to think through how you might approach conversations, hesitancies that you still have. Again, the goal of this session is not to leave thinking, I feel great, awesome. But the goal is really to empower you to feel like, okay, I can see some of the words I can use, some of the strategies, and that telling my child, being open and honest with them is sometimes the greatest gift I can give them. The gift of trust, the gift of open communication, the gift of you modeling for them. And I feel a heavy heart in my own heart, thinking about you that I haven't even met across the screen. But I just thank you so much for your bravery and for your courage to come here today, to want to engage in these conversations. As a mom myself, my heart deeply goes out to you and the great burdens you're carrying. I hope and I pray that you use that village, that you rely on people in your corner that are ready to step up and to show love to you and to your children, to remind you that you're not alone. And if I can be a resource to you in any way, my email is right underneath, and I would be more than willing to talk with you. And I hope that you're able to plug in more with Inheritance of Hope and all the wonderful resources and support that they offer. I wish you well and engaging in the next few sessions with this retreat, with this weekend, and humbly thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. And with that, I'm going to turn off my screen. Thank you all so very much, and may the Lord bless you and keep you.